I'm Jim Mockford. I'm president of the Northwest China Council, and it's a real pleasure to be here at Pacific Northwest College of Arts, which is now Willamette University Pacific Northwest College of Art, which is something that happened in the couple of years that I have not been coming to anything in person, because this happens to be our first in-person event and hybrid event. And this is only possible thanks to Rose Bond, Ron Sheng, the tech crew up in the booth, and a lot of people who have been wanting us to come back to the Pearl District or downtown or Old Town Chinatown and do something in person. And because it is, what is this, Focus Week here? Focus Week, we thought maybe as you know, partners in the community, we could get focused and try to do something with the students who are here. It's great to see students who have not been around for a couple of years. Well, not very often anyway. And I have to warn you students that I used to be a teacher myself, and you're probably happy that I went to software up the street at Wacom for 22 years. But when I was a teacher, I used to give out homework. And so I'm giving out homework to you right now, which is come visit northwestchinacouncil.org, our website, check out our videos, which we've posted, and they're on YouTube. So if you ever miss a lecture like this one, you can always come back and see Ron in the future on one of our posted videos. This is the third in a series we started in January, a series called the Creative Professional Series of a China Chat program, which also has a book talk series and some other programs. But as a Creative Professional Series, Rose and some of her students came in January and attended a talk by Yingzong Xin of Pixar Animation, and she kicked off the year for us. We had a photographer called Jingzi Zhao who does great dance photography. She was our speaker in March, and they were totally on Zoom. And now we are here in person with Ron Sheng, alumni of PNCA, who's a filmmaker, and he's gonna kick off here in just a minute. And I think our executive director, John Wong, upstairs in the tech booth, has been letting people in from the waiting room. And that's why I ramble on to give him a chance to do that. For those who are listening on Zoom, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you want to enter a question, you can do that, and we will field questions from people who are not here in person, you know, when we are able to do that at the end of the talk. But we will start with questions from the audience that's present at the end of the talk. And I think, Ron, what we'll do is when you're done, you can just open it up for questions, and then I will sneak around to the Zoom audience while we pass this mic off to people in the room. Since that means you won't have to listen to me anymore, in just a minute, I will say a couple more things. We have a great program coming up called Rising Above Hate with Machada Smith McGovern from New York and local host Mara Youngren Brown, that will take place on Zoom on May 11th. And that's posted on our website. You're all invited to join that talk. And then we have a book talk in May on May 19th by an author who wrote a book called Fallen Tigers, The Fate of Americans Missing Airmen in China During World War II. So it is the year of the tiger. We've been having tiger events, and this is a book about flying tigers. So please, as your homework students, come to Northwest China Council and join us for any of the events that look interesting to you. At this point, I would like to thank Rose Bond. If you're gonna say anything about Ron, he was your student, right? And which you know him better than I do. But I've been really happy to work with Ron for the last several months in preparing for this lecture. So at this point, I'm gonna thank you, Ron, for your talk, and I'll let Rose take it from here.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming, students. I notice you. I have your names. Okay. Yeah. Jim, it has been a pleasure to re-meet you again. Jim was at the Wacom Center where, you know, PNCA had our little Wacom lab, our Cintiqs and stuff. That's that guy right there. So he's done a lot of work for Wacom on the international stage, really concentrating on Asia. So it was just a pleasure to meet him again and see what the Northwest China Council is doing in terms of culture and art, and to be able to offer this friendship and hosting from PNCA. I think what PNCA at Willamette wants to be is a cultural hub here. So to make these kind of partnerships with cultural organizations, you know, industry, whatever, is really, I think, what's going to be best for all of us as faculty and as students. So welcome, everyone. Welcome people online. And Ranchang, I remember looking at your portfolio, and they brought me down. They said, we have this student from Beijing, and we want you to look at his portfolio and see what classes can we waive here, and all of that. And I remember looking at your portfolio, Ron, and thinking, what a cool name, you know. But anyway, Ron did really come and persevere through just all the second language issues, you know, of what it would take, and really making the most out of PNCA, and bringing to us finally a vision, a personal vision, a vision that goes back to his cultural roots, and bringing that to a Western audience with such distinction. The film that you'll see later was Ron's thesis film here at PNCA, and it won the William Guyver Award, which is essentially, for those of you that like the dog show, it's the best of show. So of all painting, all sculpture, all work, this work was voted by the faculty as the best in the thesis show of his year. So without further ado, Ron Sheng.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Rose, for your kind words. Yeah, I feel the anticipation is quite high here. So let's just save some time and start to show you guys the film. A long, long time ago, there was a young man who enjoyed the company of his beautiful fiancée. Until one day, his fiancée suddenly left him without a word. This left the young man in huge pain. In despair and hoping to find his lost love, the young man goes to a wise man. The wise man showed him a story in a mirror. A young woman has been murdered, said the wise man. A man in white passing by discovered the body. He took off his coat to cover the naked body and left. Later, a man in black discovered the body. He carried her to a graveyard and buried her with dignity. In a past life, the woman was your lover, and the man in white was you. The good thing you did for her made a connection between you and her. Thus, you had a relationship in this life. But it cannot last, because she will eventually find the man who buried her with dignity, the man in black, and spend the rest of her life with him. There is nothing you can do to change it. This is your karma. I want her back, yelled the young man. Can't you change my karma? This is the wheel of life, the circle of karma, said the wise man. You, your lover, and all the sentient beings are part of this. We all blended by ignorance, aversion, and attachment. Therefore, karma keeps us suffering, and we stay in the 6 realms of samsara forever. Are we all imprisoned? How can I get out of this? The young man asked. Yes, replied the wise man. There is a way out. That's the road to Buddha, the road to Nirvana. Master, teach me how, the young man begged. The wise man said, the first step is to accept the truth that you are suffering. Then it's your job to find your own path to liberation. Remember, you are your own Buddha. Go find your own way. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for everyone coming here for this redo of my thesis presentation because this is actually almost exactly 4 years ago. I was standing here, right, in the same place and talk about my just finished, fresh out film is this Karma Has You. So Karma Has You is the longest single project I have worked on. There is a long story behind it, so yeah, let me talk about it. The beginning of this project can be traced back to 2010. That's way before I even moved to the US. I had a trip to Chengdu, the capital city of Sichuan province, and I paid a visit to the Sichuan Museum, which is one of the biggest museums in southwestern China. At the time, there was a folk art exhibition in the museum, which contains a collection of traditional Chinese shadow puppets. I was so fascinated by them, and I took many photos of them, just like these photos you can see. I was already an animator at the time, so I came up with the idea of creating a stop motion film with Chinese shadow puppets because I believe no one ever did that before, but that was just an idea. 4 years later, in 2014, when I applied to PNCA, I wrote an essay about my project plan. I said I want to create an animation based on Chinese shadow puppetry. I wrote about it without knowing how it could happen. As far as I can imagine, it is definitely not going to be easy. If you noticed, I keep saying Chinese shadow puppetry, not just any shadow puppetry in general. I want to emphasize that because it's a unique art form. To begin with, shadow play, also known as shadow puppetry, is an ancient art form of storytelling and entertainment. It is popular in many cultures. More than 20 countries are known to have shadow show troupes. Shadow play is an old tradition and it has a long history in Asia, especially in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Cambodia. It has been an ancient art and a living folk tradition in China, India, and Nepal. It is also known in Egypt, Turkey, most of the European countries, and the United States. One thing worth mentioning here is the religious function of shadow puppetry in ancient China. In the book Chinese Shadow Theater, the author Chen Fanping pointed out that popular religion informs the traditional shadow theater and has been a major underpinning of the performing art since the Yuan dynasty. By the way, Yuan dynasty was around the early 13th century. Like human actor theaters, but perhaps even more so, shadow theaters served a primarily religious function in the countryside, end of quote. It's not just entertainment. Shadow puppetry also has an old tradition of telling religious stories in China. On the visual level, the Chinese shadow puppets developed a unique style during their long history. If you compare them with other shadow puppets designed over the world, like I believe this one's from Thailand, this is from India, and this one I remember from Indonesia, and those are from Europe. If you compare them, you can easily see the difference between them in the material, style, craftsmanship, and aesthetic. After learn all these, I really want to inject some new energy into this ancient and fascinating art form. And just like what people did in ancient China, I want to use it as a tool of storytelling. I mentioned the connection between Chinese shadow play and its religious function, but to make it clear, the story in this film, has never become a shadow play before. It is not a popular, well-known story. I believe I heard it when I was 9 or 10 years old. It's a very old traditional Buddhism story, a parable about the essential idea of karma and Buddhism. If you keep thinking about the plot, the story, there's something very interesting about it. There are two men in the past life, the man in black and the man in white. But where is the villain? Where is the bad guy? Usually in the story, there's supposed to be a bad guy. Right? The story never told us what really happened to that poor woman or who did it. This is because this is not a story we see often in TV series or in movie theaters. It's not simply about good and evil. It's not about right and wrong. It's about the difference between a simple, kind act and a truly considerate act, about different choices made by different people and the consequences. And the consequences come long after. Ultimately, it's about action and reaction, cause and effect, choice and consequence. And that's exactly what karma is about. That's the beauty of this very old story. It introduces you to the concept of karma and Buddhism in a very, very concise way. For those questions people are asking, where is the bad guy? Who is it? What is going to happen to him? The story itself doesn't provide the answer, but not because it doesn't matter. If you fully accept and understanding the idea of karma, you will know for sure there will be a punishment for the villain and rewards for the hero. There's no question on that. It just didn't tell you right away. That's a part of the Eastern culture thing, I would say. It tries to enlighten us and helps us to see the truth by ourselves instead of telling the truth directly. It encourages to do good things and avoid evil. I believe that's a universal value for all human cultures. I know it sounds quite a cliche, like do good things, but that's how we deal with our life. That's how we become better human beings. So that's the significance of the original story. But what about me? What have I done for the story? With the core concept being kept, I added a new ending to the story because my goal is to help people to understand the idea of karma better. The original story ends after the wise man reveals the truth of the young man's past life, and that's it. To make it even clearer, I extended the story by the young man who desperately wants his lover back, begging or even threatening the wise man. And the wise man tells him that he's missing the point. The point is you are suffering in the circle of karma. You are imprisoned. Now the young man starts to ask the real question. Is there a way out? This is the question Buddhism tries to answer all the time. Even though I explain a little bit more than the original story, the ending is still very open. I did that intentionally. That's my personal understanding of Buddhism. The Buddha is not the creator of our world. He's not going to bless you or even answer your prayer. Buddha is not a messiah or a savior. Instead, he tries to teach us the method so we can save ourselves. Well, that's my understanding. Creating this film has been my way to recreate and reimagine an ancient art form using traditional methods mediated by contemporary methods. As a result, both the medium and the story are reborn, if I may say, reincarnated. Both, like because it's a reincarnation for those retired old shadow puppets, as well as this old story in this 21st century modern world. As you can see, on the left is a photo I took in the museum, and on the right is the one I recreated. Okay, that's the conceptual level of my film. Now, how did I do it on a physical level? That leads us to technical issues, a lot of technical issues. I began with finding the right material and right size for my shadow puppets, but keep the authentic look in the meantime. Traditionally, Chinese shadow puppets are made from animal skin, like ox hide or donkey skin. It gives the puppet a translucent and colorful look. Apparently, I don't have access to animal skin. And even if I did, I would rather not use them. Another problem is the size of the scale. Keep in mind that those puppets I saw in the museum are at least 20 inches high. That's too big for a stop motion puppet. It would cause a lot of trouble if I made them that big. So I had to create a smaller version of them. With these thoughts in mind, I started seeking a material that is thin, translucent, easy to cut, looks like animal skin, and ideally affordable. Therefore, I spent a dreadful long time finding and testing different materials. First of all, I've tried many kinds of paper, drawing paper, wax paper, butcher paper, cardboard, vellum. Also, I tried film, acrylic, acetate, polycarbonate, PVC, you name it. pretty much anything that comes as a scene sheet, I've given it a try. And eventually I found a certain type of parchment paper that works best and is not very pricey, which is great. Then I need to fabricate the puppets. All of my puppets are based on the photo of real performance puppets I took in the Sichuan Museum. I choose to use certain puppets which visually fits the need of my story. I put the photo into Photoshop, cut each part of the puppet into individual pieces. Then I use Illustrator to convert them to vector graphics so I can send them to the laser cutter. Yes, the powerful and wonderful laser cutter. I was so lucky to take advantage of the amazing Make Sync Code Studio in PNCA. Without their help, I don't think this puppet could have been created on time. Because if you look closely at my finished puppets, there are two of them on that table. You can check them out later. You will see how tiny those patterns and the details. Since I decided to make them in a much smaller size, I can't cut those patterns by hand. I am extremely thankful for modern technology. So let me play this short video so you can see and hear the laser cutter working. Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh? Now back to the puppets. There are other fun facts. The joint structure, like the elbow or the waist of a puppet, is hollow carved. It's a very smart traditional design that creates a balance of flexibility and weight. The puppeteer needs to hold the rod to operate the puppet during the entire show. But for a stop motion puppet, it's not necessary. I don't need them, but I choose to keep them because this is a part of the traditional design. Why do I bother so much? One of my friends used to ask me, you have the laser cutter, you have all the materials. Why don't you create something totally new? My answer is that I want to stay authentic. A Chinese shadow puppet should look like a Chinese shadow puppet. For such an old story, it deserves an old medium to represent it. And it has to be authentic. This was the first time I've created shadow puppets. I want to start from the very basic and stay with the original design. It's a learning opportunity for me with all the experience I gained in this project. Maybe I can push the boundary even further next time. But for this film, I wanted to do the best I can to mimic the traditional design and style. Apparently, staying authentic doesn't mean I don't have any of my own designs on the puppet. For example, I designed the young man's hand as a pair of clenching fists. Because in the entire plot, he's constantly trying to hold on to something, whether it is his lost love or the road to liberation. On the other hand, like literally the other hand, I made the wise man's hand extra large. They are much bigger than the normal size because his role in this story is the mentor of the young man. He keeps using his gestures and body languages to teach and guide his student. A pair of large hands can emphasize his identity in this parable. Besides the puppets, I also spent a long time designing and creating the Wheel of Life, which is the most important prop in this film. If you are familiar with Tibetan Buddhism, the Wheel of Life is a symbolic representation of karma and reincarnation. usually takes the form of a painting, can be found on the outside wall of most Tibetan Buddhist temples. Its purpose is to help common people understanding karma and Buddhism, just like the story I'm telling. The visual style of a wheel of life painting can vary a lot. It could be big or small, colored or black and white, highly detailed or simplified, but they always share the same symbols. For instance, at the center of the wheel, 3 animals are always shown: a pig, a rooster, and a snake. They represent ignorance, aversion or anger, and attachment. They are the so-called 3 poisons, or the root of our suffering. The 3 poisons lead to karma. Karma leads to our suffering in the 6 realms. Then you can see the depiction of the 6 realms, which take up the majority of the wheel. On the outer realm, like the outer, this circle, there are 12 panels, and they are called the 12 links. They show how karma continually happens by presenting the process of cause and effect in detail. Each one of them contains a drawing. Again, they are highly symbolized. For example, the 2 people afloat in a boat represent mental and physical existence. A drinker receiving a drink represents thirst or desire. A man carrying a corpse represents aging and death. As mentioned, I want to stay authentic to the traditional design, but to make a deeper connection between the characters in this film and the concept of karma. I embedded some scenes and characters themselves into the outer realm of the wheel to replace some of the original panels. This gives the viewer another opportunity to see his or her own life in the wheel of life. Like I said at the beginning, this project was a long process and also a learning process. I've learned so much from it. During the process, the medium and the story keep changing and getting better and better. Now, with the finished film, I see a new aesthetic was born, and I see this as a new beginning. For me, this film was only a starting point, because with all the experience and knowledge I've accumulated from this project, there is a huge potential and possibilities for this medium. With my understanding of shadow puppets, now I can create my own designs, tell new stories, or use them in other kinds of projects. This project is done, but I'm not done with shadow puppets. It's only a start. As an animator and an artist, this was my thesis project. As a Buddhist, I see this as a part of my practice of Buddhism. As a man from China, as a man who loves traditional Chinese culture so deeply, this is my way to inherit the legacy of traditional Chinese shadow puppetry and give it a new life in the form of contemporary animated art. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
If you have a question, raise your hand. And we're using the mic because there are people watching on Zoom, and we want them to hear your question and have it part of the recording. So we'll have that happen in a minute. I did forget to invite all of you in the audience to join us afterwards for some Chinese cookies and tea. And want to thank you, Ron. What a fabulous story. I'm so happy you were able to share it with members of Northwest China Council today. Some of them are here in the audience and some are out there online. But I always wanted to present something like this because students should know that whatever you do has meaning to the community. And so if we can share it, like even 4 years after your thesis, share it with the community. Let us know at Northwest China Council if you have a China-related project. We might want you to show up here in 4 years or less and share your story. And think of other community organizations that you can share it with, because there's many of those in Portland who may have an interest in the type of art and projects that you're doing. So does anybody have a question for Ron here in the audience? And I'll put my mask on. Yes, I'll take it over there.
Thank you. Oh, loud, sorry. You said that creating the Wheel of Life was like a really big task and challenge, and I'm really interested to hear about what materials you used for creating that.
Yeah, that is, I remember it just simply a big piece of thick brown paper, because you can, if you watch the film, it's because I always put everything on a huge light table.
Mm-hmm.
So the light from the bottom will kind of get through. I didn't do it as the same as I create those puppets. I didn't really cut them. I use the laser cutter to kind of carving on them and get a tiny layer out of the paper, because the paper is quite thick, so it didn't totally get through. So it creates that kind of effects on the paper. It's like a laser drawing, laser cutter drawing.
Very cool. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, I see one over here. Just a minute.
So I was just wondering what the significance of the two puppets that you chose was exactly, or I guess the three, because you showed a couple of designs that you had taken pictures of from the museum, but I was just wondering if those ones in specific had stories already, or if you were just choosing those designs because you liked them more or something.
That's a good question, because I do know those puppets, because those are actual like performance puppets. I believe they belong to Shadow Puppet Trope, or a group like that, and most likely donated to the museum. And those designs are specifically for their own play, or usually a folk story. I choose simply because they're available. I took very good picture of them, so the picture itself can be used to create my own puppet. I basically based on the visual appearance of the puppet. So I choose, because there is a wise man. He's essentially a monk, and the main characters and everything, they're actually from different folk stories. I know the lady wear a total white dress. She's actually a character from the famous White Snake old story. That one. So yeah, I simply just choose them to suit this story.
Is the character above the wheel the Buddha recognizing the action, or is it another person kind of commenting on the action?
Sorry,
the character up in the far right above the wheel.
Oh yeah, that is the Buddha. Yeah, you can see. I believe you're mentioning about this, right? Yeah,
exactly.
You can see these two are both paintings of Wheel of Life, and that's what I'm saying. It's always share the same symbols, and they're always the Buddha at the upper right corner, and pointing out to the usually is a moon, but that's kind of a symbol of nirvana. It's like the ultimate goal for Buddhism is to help all the sentient being to go to achieve nirvana. And another fact is this monster, if you can see here, he's holding the big wheel of life. He is a monster of time. And Buddha is outside of time in this kind of painting. He's always there, and he's already beyond the time. That's the symbolism behind it. Of course.
I am getting exercise today. There you go.
你好，你
你好。
做这个电影时大概花了多长时间？How long did it take to make the film?
I'm really glad to hear you speak very good Chinese.
谢谢。
If you don't mind, I'll answer it in English so
Okay.
other people can understand. Basically, yeah, like I said, it can be traced back to many years ago, but the actual length of time, I started from September 2017, and the entire film finished on April 2018. So that's, we can count like about 8 months. That's how long it is. It's a quite long time to create a film, especially well, any animation film is quite time consuming, but stop motion is especially on that side.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering if you could speak towards the maybe differing impacts of viewers, where some viewers might be more familiar with the history involved with this, because it sounds like there's a lot of personal exploration into history and culture for you. But yeah, if you have any knowledge on how it impacted viewers that aren't familiar with it, or if it is just, for me, for instance, like I'm learning because of the film, all these things.
Thank you for saying that. It's really interesting to, it's kind of ironic, because when I show this film here, originally, I remember I have a line at the end of my proposal. It's like to help people to see the world in a different eye, in the eye of Buddhism. When I say that, I hear people here in the US telling me, you're not really showing something new, because we already know the idea of karma. We know Buddhism very well. And I was like, okay, but for people who are not familiar with it. And the ironic part is, I know there's a lot of people in China where I came from. Actually, they use the word karma in Chinese. It's usually called 因果, 报应, something like that. But they not truly understand the meaning of it. Like they get the idea, but they don't understand the meaning behind the word, because it is an idea. It's also a concept. It's a very essential concept behind the Buddhism. So I hope that answers your question. It's really ironic. I expecting to see more people like, oh, I learned something new from your film in here, but ironically, I hear more of that from my own my home country. So yeah.
I know a little bit about the Indonesian and Balinese and even Turkish traditions of shadow play, which was a performative event, right? So it was something the community would come together, and it was outside and at night, and often many, many, many hours. But I don't know the history of Chinese shadow puppetry. So what would a performance of shadow puppetry in China look like? Is it a storytelling as in a tradition where people come together, or is it more entertainment? Maybe you could also then talk about how you took that history and changed it into a short film format.
Yeah. First of all, I must admit, during my whole life, I never got a chance to watch a live shadow puppet play because it's so rare. It's not because they're hard to. First of all, China is a big country, okay, and there are a lot of tropes. They couldn't travel super long distance. They will just stay in a certain region, say southwest region among say Sichuan and Yunnan on that region. So I just never got a chance to fly over there just to do that. But as far as I know, I have been left China for already many years. I couldn't say I know the situation now in China about shadow play and shadow puppetries, but as far as I know, it's declining. The entire industry of shadow play is not in a good shape because in the history, there are always people to adapt all those old stories, like just like the story I'm telling here. They adopted into a new shadow play and create new character design from it. But it's just my idea. I have the feeling less and less, fewer and fewer people are doing it simply because there are more ways to entertainment. We have live streaming, we have internet, and it's just harder and harder to get people gathering. I believe it's still there. I'm very sure it's still there, but I don't know the current situation. In the history, it was a very popular way to entertainment. You can imagine a whole village gathering around because a troop visits them and put out a wonderful show for both adults and kids. And all the story are, you can understand like classical Chinese folk stories. So yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. The puppets from Sichuan or Chengdu are extraordinarily beautiful. Is there a connection that you have with Sichuan, or because there are different styles in different parts of China? And I wondered a little bit more about that. Thank you.
I have friends there, but I don't really have any special connection with Sichuan. I know it's a historical and super beautiful place. So I simply visit there to see the natural, see all the magnificent culture. For people who are not familiar with the geographic of China mainland, Sichuan is in a basin, inside the basin. So it's kind of isolated from the majority of the mainland China. And it gives it, I would say, like an isolated culture grow up there. So it's a very unique culture, quite different from the rest of the country. Yeah, it's a really wonderful place. So if any of you got a chance to visit, I strongly recommend it to visit Sichuan. Yeah. And you might find shadow puppets there.
Any other questions from the floor? Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone online before John ends the Zoom part of this. And we've had a few technical problems, so I don't think I'll be able to bring in Zoom questions today, but they are collected and we can have you maybe take a look on email
Of course.
later. because we will save the chat. And this was our first hybrid and in-person Zoom event, so I'm really happy that it seems to have worked. And there are a couple more questions that we can discuss over tea and cookies if anyone has them. I will introduce Chris from your international office from Willamette. Wave your hand, because I know during COVID, people want to know, how do I go to China? There's nothing but shutdown and issues to go there, and they would really like to go. And I've heard from some local schools that they're simply encouraging people with an interest in China to visit your local Chinatown Museum, Lansu Chinese Garden, and up and down the West Coast. Seattle, of course, has Wing Luke Museum, Vancouver, BC, San Francisco, LA, all have great communities with Chinese heritage being on exhibit in museums that you have access to, either online or if you do a road trip, you'll find a lot of fun and interesting things going on the West Coast. And until international exchange of students is able to take place, maybe that's a good way of finding China in America through organizations like ours and through your own international office. So I encourage people to do that with whatever their area of interest is. And John, are you about ready to end the recording? He's waving. Thank you so much, John, for helping us online today. And at this point, I'll say thanks once again, Ron, for wonderful presentation. And I hope people will stay and chat informally today on our last final program of the Creative Professional Series. What a great job. Once more, give them a great hand.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.